All right, good morning. It's 9 o'clock, time for us to begin our Bible class time. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being in here. Hate to interrupt the normal class schedule, but that's part of Fifth Sunday anyway. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that we're going to be able to talk about who's in control. In case you're visiting with us, my name's Jon McKenzie. I'm the youth and family minister here at the Bridgewood Church of Christ. I think we've been here for 13 years, I think. And for about a decade of that time, for about 10 years, I've been giving a presentation on media and technology. And one of the things that I think is interesting to point out is that everything has changed in those 10 years as far as technology is concerned, but Scripture has not. Sometimes with media, with technology, you know, we've got all these great devices. The iPhone is 10 years old now. Changed the world. A lot of people now have smartphones, have tablets, have all these different access to technology that we never did before. And so sometimes it's great. And it allows us to do things that we never thought we could do before. But other times it can feel overwhelming. Sometimes it can even scare us. And sometimes we might even panic. And so sometimes we feel like, you know what? I'm just going to throw that away. Right? I think everyone who has a smartphone or a tablet or something like that, and they think they have to have it for work, they've felt that before. But you know what? In this world that we live in today, for my generation, for the generations below me, the possibility of being unplugged is getting slimmer and slimmer. We have to have technology for school. We have to have technology for work. And so we have to learn how to manage it. So one of the things that I've really changed in this presentation, I really want to urge you, is don't panic. What happens when we panic? When we panic, we make poor decisions. We make decisions sometimes that we regret. And so the whole purpose of this morning and the sermon today and what we're trying to do is to prepare ourselves, educate ourselves, think about this, because there really, the possibility of escaping from technology for my generation and below for sure is really minimal. And so we have to learn how to manage it. Scripture, though, as I mentioned already, Scripture hasn't changed. A lot of people will think, you know, this book, this Bible, thousands of years old, what does it have to do with modern technology? There is so much wisdom and insight that is timeless, that surpasses technology, that surpasses changes in society, that guides us and tells us what it is that we were supposed to be doing and are supposed to be doing. Ephesians 5:15-16 tells us to look then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Recognize that when that was written to the church at Ephesus, they were classifying their days as being evil. We also consider that our days, there's a lot of bad things that are going on. But again, if we panic, we overreact. I don't know what it was like. You know, some of you don't have children at home anymore. Some of you have grandchildren. Some of you don't have children yet. But probably most of us, when we were a child or when we had children at home, had a plan if the house caught on fire, right? Some of you have survived homes being on fire. But with our children, they're 9 and 5, we have a distinct plan. We've told them, if there's a fire, here's the things that you do, here's the things that you don't do, and here's where you go to get help. But we've also instilled within them the idea that above all else, you get out of the house. You break a window, you do whatever you have to do to get out of the house. We have a plan for the rare occurrence that we have a house fire in our home. But many of us, as individuals and as families, fail to make a plan for dealing with the known dangers that we're going to encounter. There is no doubt for individuals of any age, there is no doubt for children, that at some point with technology, you will be exposed to things that you don't want to see. And you will have to manage things that you maybe didn't think about how to manage. So if we develop a plan as individuals, as couples, as families, as extended families, on how we are going to deal with media, how we're going to deal with technology, we'll be all the more prepared. We have plans for all these different things that the odds of those things happening to us are pretty slim. But for something that we know with certainty we will be exposed to, we don't have a plan. And so don't panic, be informed, be prepared, make a plan. And it starts with, in a family, it starts with mom and dad. Or if you're a single parent, it starts with you. But you have to think about for yourself what is the appropriate level of use, time, all these different things for our family. I can't tell you what that number is. That's something that you have to look at. When I did this presentation in the first years, I would actually talk about specific programs. I would talk about specific music. I would talk about specifics. I don't do that anymore. Because the important thing, the timeless thing, is to deal with the underlying structure that we put in place to deal with media, to deal with technology that is ever changing. Quickly, more faster than ever. And so it starts with mom and dad. Some suggested questions, and you've got a sheet in your handout that you picked up. It's not so much an outline as a sheet for you to continue this thought and discussion with when you get home. The 5 questions that you might consider are the who, what, when, why, and where, and even how. You could add that in there, right? Well, let me give you an example dialogue of how that plan might go. Who in our homes can use what device and when, right? That's not something we talk about a whole lot. But we have to think about who is allowed to use these things, who is allowed to do certain things on these devices, who's allowed to install apps without asking mom and dad. If you're a grandparent or an aunt and uncle, do you know what the policy is of the child's parents? Having open communication about expectations on technology is an important thing in today's world. So who, what, when, where can they use these things? Where can they be stored? And why? Why are we doing this? Why are we using this application? Or why are we posting this image on social media? Why are we doing these things? And so you actually go through the process and write these things down. On the handout, I believe I got in there a link that you can go to later on. It's from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it actually gives you sample questions to consider as a couple or as a family, looking at how to make a media plan for your family. It's also a good thing to think about if you're an individual. It's also a good thing to think about even if you're a grandparent. One of the things, of course, that really is challenging is bedtime, right? When we talk about the where is it acceptable to use these devices? When is it acceptable to use these devices? Are you going to allow yourself as an adult, or are you going to allow your children to have a screen in their bedroom, a TV, a computer, things like that? Are you going to allow them to have a tablet or a phone in their bed? The danger, more and more, of course, is the fact that not only could they be exposed to things that you wouldn't be aware of, but also the idea that that sleep patterns are disrupted. And so we have a generation of teenagers, so specifically, who are in that zombie mode because they're not getting the sleep that they need. And so you have to think about, as a family, am I going to take my device and leave it in the kitchen at night? Well, I use it for my alarm clock. Well, go to Target and buy yourself a $10 alarm clock, right? Let that device have some space from you. Let you have some space from that device. It's good advice for children. It's good advice for adults. Part of a plan, obviously, is knowing what to do in emergencies. Emergencies are going to happen. And so if you have a plan, you have to have consequences as well. Maybe you have consequences for yourself as an individual. Maybe you have consequences for your children if they break the rules. What do you do if you find out that your children have been posting inappropriate images of other people or bullying, cyberbullying other people online? What are you going to do about it? These are things that you have to think through as part of your plan, part of the realities that we live in today. And also, as Steve Miner has talked about from this pulpit before in the book about being an anchor for your family, Anchorman, talks about letting your children know that when they have been exposed to something that they don't understand or they can't deal with on their own, or that is just troubling to them, that they can come to you and unload that on you. Your role as a parent is not to panic, not to overreact, but be prepared for the knowledge that your child will be exposed to something, perhaps accidentally, perhaps something that they stumbled into. But that you have to be there and you have to be ready for that child to come and unload that on you. And you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to deal with that. And if it's serious enough, you need to have a plan in place for how to get help. Last thought on making a plan for your family. It involves everyone. So you establish a plan for your family and you communicate it to your extended family that your children spend time with. Grandparents, aunts and uncles, everybody is needed to be a part of this process. Even the communication extends beyond family. If your children go and spend time quite a bit with someone, talk to that family about your expectations for how things will be monitored. It's a challenging conversation to have, but it's also one that can spread some of this knowledge, some of this information. We don't have to panic about what's going on, but we do have to be in control. And so we have those conversations. As individuals even, we have those conversations. I had a young man over at the house this week working with me out in the shop. And we were working on something that was really mundane. And he said, hey, is it okay if I turn on a show? There's nothing, he listed off all the things that weren't in it. And I said, I appreciate you letting me know. You know that I have standards for what I watch. Let's watch it. Right? When you let people know what these things are that you are involved in and you don't want to be involved in, if they're your friends, if they have respect for you, they'll go along with that. They recognize what you're trying to accomplish. Let's move on. Trend number 2, of course, is that innocence is lost. This is probably the portion of my presentation that has changed the most. I used to use a lot of statistics and figures that really, if you sat and thought about them, would cause a lot of panic and alarm. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to not get people to panic. I want you to be aware. I want you to be informed. I want you to be prepared, but I don't want you to panic. All right? Think about all the different times when you've panicked and you make bad choices. We know these things are out there. We don't know exactly how they might come into our lives, but we need to be informed and we need to be prepared. Of course, one of the reasons why this particular portion of our presentation is 7th grade and up is there are things that we're going to talk about right now that I don't want my children hearing. I am trying to, and I'm charged by God to protect the innocence of my children as long as I possibly can. And so in this setting, I don't want to say anything that would harm the innocence of my children. And I also would do that for yours. I want to protect the innocence of your children. But in that 7th grade and up range, we do recognize that the average exposure, accidental exposure, to pornographic imagery on the internet, on a connected device, is 9 years old. It's actually been in that range for a long, long time. As long as they've kind of studied this, it's been in that 9 to 12-year-old age range for stumbling across something, right? Y'all have done it. Brianna and I have talked about it. At camp last year, I was looking up something innocent, and Buddy Fry and I were sitting there, and we're looking on the search thing, and we're looking for an image for something we were doing. And in this very innocent search, all of a sudden there's this very graphic image, and both of us are just like, ah! Because here we are, two ministers at church camp with this on a screen. Part of having a plan, part of having that discussion with your children, part of being prepared is to recognize that you have to prepare them for the idea that these things are going to come along, and what are you going to do about it? We're going to talk about that more in the sermon. I have a whole point that's devoted right to that thought in the sermon later on this morning. So we'll leave that there and we'll come back to it, okay? But as far as innocence lost, as far as the things that we recognize as a danger, more now than ever, parents, grandparents, individuals must be actively engaged in educating themselves and their children about the dangers that do exist. Recognize that for me, for my wife, we are learning how to use these devices as well. How to balance out time, how to balance priorities. These are something that's come along in our lifetime. Our children are digital natives. That's the term that they use. And so, Claire doesn't know that when you go and you touch a screen, all screens aren't touch screens, right? Because that's all she's known most of her life. And so parents sometimes lose track of the time that they're spending on the devices, the distraction that they're becoming, or the distraction that they're becoming within their marriage or their parenting. We recognize that some of the dangers that are out there, of course, pornography being one of them, and then for our children, things like cyberbullying. One of the newest terms that I've heard, sextortion. People getting other folks, other peers, to send images and then blackmailing them with those images. If you don't give me this or don't whatever, I'll send this to everyone at our school. That's a thing now. We recognize there's danger for our families. And we recognize also that there's danger for our reputation. Proverbs 4:23 talks about keeping our heart, keeping the heart of our children, keeping the heart of our families. Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all vigilance, awareness, effort. For from it flow the springs of life. Then it continues on in verse 24, put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, and then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left, or turn your foot away from evil. For the individual, for the family, for everyone, we hope to stay straight ahead. In a world that's pulling this way and pulling that way, we hope to stay straight ahead. We as individuals are striving to get to heaven. We as parents are striving to teach our children the love of God, the knowledge of God that we have, so they'll stay on that straight path, recognizing that more so than ever, there is a constant pull to the right and to the left. Distractions abound. And so we have to recognize that as far as the innocence of our children, we want to maintain it as long as we possibly can by being vigilant, by being aware, by being present. And part of that is having a plan for our family, for ourselves, for what to do. For all of us, too, I also want to encourage the idea of being with others. When we talk about the things that encourage us, hopefully the things that encourage us are being around people of like mind and like faith. But more and more in our world, we see something like this, where we're all on our devices, even when we're together, right? We've all seen folks, eating dinner together and everybody's on a device, and we've seen kids that are all hanging out and they're all on a device. And we recognize that there's some fun that can go on there. Maybe they're playing games together or something like that. But we also recognize there's great value in simply talking with each other, encouraging one another. sharing stories and troubles and examples of the hard times that we're facing, the things that we're doing to overcome, the things that are helping us in our journey. And so the importance of putting down the devices as a family, putting down the devices as individuals, putting down the devices in pretty much every occasion and opportunity. We recognize the power of the time that we spend with each other. Our third trend, and this was one that was suggested to me to add into the presentation, was that of comparison. This quote that's often attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, "Comparison is the thief of joy," is something I've talked about from this pulpit before. But in our world where we're so connected, we have social media, Pinterest, and all these different things, we recognize that comparison has become an even bigger problem. Right? I remember when I was growing up hearing all the different discussions about body image and these different things that we do to compare ourselves to people in magazines, right? So you'd have that magazine, you'd look in the magazine, you compare yourself against these things. So it's nothing new. But now, more so than ever, the prevalence of material that's out there, the knowledge that's out there, and sometimes this bullying that happens too, can really make us question ourselves, question and compare ourselves against an unrealistic standard, and also can really impact our contentment as individuals. My wife noted, and some of the other women noted, that if you look at young girls today, 13 and 14-year-olds, you know, it used to be that 13 and 14-year-olds would go through a really awkward stage, right? That was part of life for all of us. You know, your hair would look kind of interesting, or your clothes would look kind of interesting as you're trying to establish your own style, right? Well, now with access to all these different resources, you have 13 and 14-year-olds that are beautiful, right? They don't go through that awkward stage anymore. They have it all together. And this is a change in our society that we see as we look at comparison. They compare themselves and they look at, maybe on Pinterest, how to do their hair, how to do the certain style wardrobe they want to. And so we recognize that in itself is a change. There's also this meme that's been floating around in the last week or two. I'd love to be a Pinterest mom, but it turns out I'm more of an Amazon Prime type of mom. There are some people in this audience, I guarantee you, don't have a clue what this is about, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Other folks understand it. They know what Pinterest is. They know what Amazon Prime is. I want to speak for a second to the folks that don't know what those things are. Just because you don't know what Pinterest is, and just because you don't know what Amazon Prime is, that doesn't make you less effective or outdated. If you don't know what those things are, that's great. You still have the ability to love, you still have the ability to encourage, and you still have the ability to lovingly question what it is that the younger generations are doing. Things that you see in your grandchildren or your children that concern you. You don't have to know all the latest apps and all the latest websites and all that stuff. You don't even have to use a smartphone, right? There's a lot of folks that still use the old flip phones. You don't have to have all the latest stuff, and you don't have to understand it all, because you have life experience on your side. And so you can be engaged in these loving conversations, and you can be a part of encouraging contentment. Looking in Philippians 4, verses 11 through 13, if you want to turn over there. Philippians 4 is a place we're going to be in our sermon as well. But Paul's speaking. He said, "Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me." Recognize that in an era where we can click a button and something will be at our house waiting for us by the time we get home, right? It is sometimes hard to be content with what we have. In an era where on social media you can put your best foot forward and you can look like you have it all together, it can make others feel like when you post that ultimate image of your family or yourself, it can make others wonder, what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? I think the photo, the Christmas card that has received the most compliment from our family, because that's typically something we do. We put photos of our family on our Christmas cards or something like that. Was a couple years ago when we were doing the photo of the girls, and Claire just had an absolute meltdown, right? We're trying to get a nice photo of the girls by the tree, and Claire just flips on the ground and just wailing, kicking, screaming, has a fit. Doesn't want to be a part of the photo. She was a 3-year-old, I think, at the time, 2 or 3, something like that. We sent that photo out as our Christmas card, and people loved it because it was real. We all have those moments. So don't think because you don't have, the best car, or you're not on the best vacation, or you're not dressed the best, or all these different things that you're missing out. Contentment, peace, happiness, those flow out of the Word. There are things here that you can't get anywhere else. And so we have to look to the Word. Stuff isn't going to do it for us. A fourth tip is looking at time. You see a young boy there with a tablet that uses some time management software, showing what time he's spent on what devices. Again, if you came looking for specifics to this seminar, you're going to be disappointed. We're giving you a guidance, a framework, something to take home and think about in your own family. I can't tell you how much or how little is the right time for you to be using technology or watching TV. That is a decision that you have to look at. You were created by God to learn and with the freedom to choose. And you choose how you spend your time as an individual. But we have structure, we have guidance from Scripture on the things that we're supposed to be doing. And so we have to look at our entertainment, we have to look at our devices, and we have to apply what we learn in Scripture to that. But that's for you to look at and for you to think about. We're thinking about time and we're thinking about our children. I will admit, as a parent of young children, that it is so easy to just turn the TV on for our child and either, go back to bed, go work in the office, or do whatever it is that we want to do. It is so easy, right? Because the children, they love the TV. I don't know, as a parent, I love TV, right? There's nothing wrong with TV. There's nothing wrong with using technology. We have to be careful about the things that we watch, but we do have to manage how much we're watching and how much time we're spending, right? For a long time, there's been panic about what is TV doing to our children. It's burning their eyes out. Remember the different images of the kids sitting in front of the old tube TVs and the shadow that was burned into the carpet. Of course, those were exaggerated to a certain extent. We've always talked about what is it, the violent content and the sexual content in TV, what's that doing to our children? There's things that we look at there as well. But we have to recognize that the interactive smartphones and tablets are a whole new thing. The research is coming in, and we're going to talk about this in our sermon today as well. The research is coming in that it actually fires off dopamine and other endorphins, things like that, that actually are causing changes in the way that our brains are wired when you're overusing these devices. It's serious enough where the U.S. Navy this last year conducted an extensive research project on what technology is doing to their sailors. But for our children, we have to look at what is wise as far as time is concerned. The youngest of children, the recommendation is still under 2 years of age, just no screen time at all. There is no pediatrician, there is no group that says anything to the contrary of that. And so for the youngest of children, if you have 2 and below, really, really look at the research, look at the medical research, the documentation to see if that's something that your children should be involved in at all. But coming up through the younger ages, it's important that parents instill for their children guidelines of use. In our home, we try to limit our girls to an hour of television during weekdays, screen time, not just television, screen time during weekdays. And on the weekends, we go up to about 2 hours, right? Now, there's exceptions. Last night, we had some friends over and we watched Mary Poppins, right? Mary Poppins, everybody likes Mary Poppins. It was, I considered it research for today. But it was 2.5 hours long. So you have some flexibility in what you're doing as a family and the things that you allow. These aren't, super hard and fast, but you recognize that being on a screen all day is going to be problematic. As adults, we also have the urge to pull out our device at any spare moment. And so adults also have to think about what it is that you're doing with media. I've talked to a number of guys that I know that are in my age range, and when we purposely leave our phone somewhere, I asked if I'm the only one who gets that ghost vibration in their pocket where the phone should be. Any of y'all have ever experienced that? It's scary. You're like, now I realize I have a problem because I purposely left my phone somewhere and my leg is still vibrating from my phone. That's scary. But we recognize that our children want our attention. Our children want to be involved with us, and so we as parents also need to be careful of the time that we spend on the phones, on the different devices. Of course, with work, it's really easy to lose track of that because our workplaces put a lot of demands on us from modern technology. One thing that we'd be remiss in not talking about in this presentation and when we're talking about time is video games. Again, I don't talk about specifics anymore. I will give you one word of caution, though, with video games, something that you need to be involved in if your kids are playing games. You need to look at the rating system for video games, what the content is that they're looking at, and especially as smartphone games become more prevalent, more involved, more advanced, you need to look at the online interactive component of that game. So if there's a chat feature, you need to listen in on some of that chat. I guarantee you will be shocked at some of the things you hear. We have some sailors in the audience today, and I guarantee you some of those sailors could put that on and blush, right? We also have to be aware of the chat, the things that go back and forth. I know, even folks of a different generation, an older generation, have had inappropriate things texted to them in some of the chat features of the games. And so it's something that we have to think about. The video game industry is one that's changing. The latest numbers I could find were from 2015. $23.6 billion. That's a B. $23.6 billion was spent in gaming. And the way I understood the report is that was just on console gaming and computer gaming, individual devices. It didn't involve smartphones, right? So 23.6 billion, 16 billion of that being on devices alone. But 23.6 billion for the video game industry in 2005. The average age now of a gamer, this does involve phone games. The average age of a gamer for males is 35. And the average age of a female gamer is 41. May not be what you expected it to be. You know, if 35 and 41 are the average age of a gamer today, that means that there are folks in their 60s and 70s who are playing games. And again, there's nothing wrong with playing games, right? There's nothing wrong with entertainment, good, wholesome entertainment, where we're educated, we're informed, we're prepared. But we have to look at how we're using our time. We have to see if that's distracting us from anything. Is it just a casual pastime that we do to wind down, or is it interacting with things that we should be doing? And so let's think about that when we're talking about games as well. And obviously time is a big component of gaming, and so that's why we bring it up under the section of time. thinking about what it is that we're doing. My final tip for this morning is to recognize, again, in a world where it's easy to be overwhelmed by technology, scared and frightened, is to remember that it's not all bad. We can think that technology and media and the internet are this big evil thing that we don't want to have anything to do with. If you don't prepare your children when they're in your home to deal with these things, to handle these things, to be able to come to you, to be able to turn to Scripture, to be able to turn to trusted folks, friends, to look for guidance, they're going to be vastly unprepared for whatever waits ahead of them in technology. But remember that there is lots of good out there. It's fun to be informed. It's fun to interact with people. It's fun to do silly things and send silly pictures back and forth. There's lots of fun to be had. There's lots of good to be had. But quite often we tend to focus on the worst of things. So be educated. Know that those things exist, but also know that good things exist. Of course, here at Bridgewood, we're trying to use technology to advance the cause of Christ. We have the online Bible study tool. You'll find it in your handout there as well, the seekYeFirst.org website that you can access on your device, your smartphone, your tablet, or your computer. We have a large number of people from our community who are participating in that online study because we're using technology. We're using Google Ads to reach people that we don't have access to any other way. Technology isn't all bad and it's not all evil. But if you get to the point in your life where you think that it's all bad and you just can't deal with it anymore, remember that every device out there has a power button. I've never seen a phone, a tablet, a computer, a TV that didn't have a power button. And I guess if the power button's not working, you can just unplug the thing from the wall, right? If you're watching a television show and it's filling you with hate or it's filling you with anger, change the channel. If you're looking at something on the internet that's making you think or write, that's the worst, right? In our world, we write things on the internet that we wouldn't say in person. We get lost in pointless arguments on social media. We lose our reputation as a Christian because of the things that we share and we like. Those outside the church look at us and say, why is that Christian using that language or using that hateful speech or all these different things? Turn it off. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. It's the best thing that you can do for your children as well sometimes. When things get completely out of control, turn it off. You don't necessarily need it. All right? That's our 5 points for this morning. I have a couple other things to look at real quick. I always try to encourage. I also try to equip as well. Some of the tools, this is on the back page of your handout this morning. There's a little laptop at the bottom. There's 3 lines at the bottom. 3 things that are really important to me. Plugged In is one of them. Pluggedin.com is part of the Focus on the Family website family. You can go on there and they write about movies, TV shows, music, video games, all these different things. They'll give you an honest critique. There's lots of other sites out there like pluggedin.com. But it's part of being informed, part of being educated. The interesting thing about Plugged In, as television programming changes, and it's no longer the network channels that you necessarily, are having all the big popular shows. Now, Amazon and Netflix and Hulu have their own popular shows. There is no way that an individual or a website like Plugged In could tell you everything about every show that's coming out. You would go blind if you tried to watch all that, right? And so it's just part of being informed. It's part of monitoring. Right now, Brianne and I are watching the Lemony Snicket's a series of shows that came out on Netflix. We're watching it to see if it's going to be appropriate for Avery. We're previewing it because she's been reading those books, and we're seeing if it's going to be something that as a family we feel comfortable with her watching or not. That's part of being informed and making these decisions. And I encourage you to do the same for your children, and also as individuals being willing to turn things off. One piece of advice I try to give to teenagers especially, sometimes you walk into a movie theater and you didn't know what the movie was going to be about, and you get in there, you're like, ooh, this PG-13 movie is really not good. There's an awful lot of stuff in here I didn't expect to be in there. I have never been to a movie theater that wouldn't give you your money back if you leave the show. If you go up front, you talk to the manager, and you're 20, 30 minutes into a movie, and you're like, you know what, there's things in there I just don't want to watch. I've never been to a movie theater where they wouldn't give you a refund. And even if they don't give you a refund, $10 lost is not the end of the world. The other thing that I also encourage families to look at is the Open DNS service. It's a free service, and this may get into a world where a lot of people are scratching their heads saying, internet router and DNS filtering? Oh my. It's not that complex. If you let your grandson or granddaughter come over and look at OpenDNS, I guarantee you they could get this going for you. But basically, I've got this diagram here. You've got the internet, the cloud, right? And so you've got the internet, and then you have a device in your house, a router or a modem, where that signal from the internet is processed, and it goes to your computer, and it goes back, right? And so what OpenDNS does, they work with big companies, and they have refined their site blocking technology. Things that are inappropriate. And you can use this service for free in your home to block inappropriate content. We use it here at the church building as well. And so it's one of those things where, if you go and you type in, don't do this, by the way, but if you go and type in playboy.com, it will be blocked. And so the obvious sites, the things that are going to be troublesome are going to be blocked out. The other thing that's pretty cool is it blocks out a lot of the different known sites that will try and load malware onto your computer. So some of those things that people wind up getting into, it's a side bonus. But that's another thing. And there's also a book that's referenced in there that's worth picking up and reading. We have a couple minutes before class is wrapped up. Does anyone have any questions? This is Bible class, so we can take questions. Cindy, yes?